Hello. So we're here on YouTube with the quick turnaround between game weeks 27 and 29. And what a damp squib of a game week it was. We kicked off after the week. Oh dear. And I've done that thing as well where I've had the YouTube on in the background, so it's completely screwed up my focus there. Let's do that again. We're very professional.
Oh, are we still live?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, nice.
Okay, I'm do that again. Okay. Hello. So we're here on YouTube with a quick turnaround between game weeks 27 and 29, meaning we can't really do a podcast because it wouldn't be worth the effort. What a damp squib of a game week it was of blank game week 27. To hopefully lighten the end of the game week for you guys, I'm joined today by Nick and a familiar face/voice to some of you in Will, the head honcho of fansfootballhub.co.uk. Welcome, Will.
Hi there, guys. It's a pleasure to be on. I've been listening to you for ages, so it's an honor, and really looking forward to getting started. And if anyone wants to give us a follow, we're at FFootballHub on Twitter. So go check us out if you don't already.
Yeah, cheers, Will. Brilliant to have you on the pod for the first time, the first of many, perhaps. But yeah, just to say quickly who we are Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Twitter at WGTQ+FPL. You can use Spotify, SoundCloud, whatever you'd like to listen and subscribe. So yeah, as this is a WGTQ+A, we won't be doing a proper podcast this week because of the quick turnaround between the game weeks, but instead we'll be giving our thoughts on a few burning questions that we've been asked in the aftermath of the game week just gone. So let's quickly get on with the game week reviews. Let's get those out of the way because it's been a bit of a rubbish week, as we said, before moving on to the questions. So do you want to start then, Will?
I think like many, it was not a good one for me. Just the 37 with the -4 on top of that. So yeah, 33 all out, which not brilliant. But I was very close to doing Aguero to Aubameyang for a -4. It was actually Tom who gave me a heads up on that. Lacazette could potentially start instead of Aubameyang, so I'm pleased to avoid that one. But how about you? How do you guys get on?
All right. Well, I'll go next then, and share the news that I've completed an FPL achievement. I've got it. It came up as a little trophy. 10 red arrows in a row. It's been a fantastic period for me. Really showing off my managerial credentials here, being able to do the unthinkable. 34 points for me. Aubameyang captain, and head in my hands when he missed that kind of late chance. So I was hoping that I could at least sneak something. But yeah, it didn't really go that fantastically. Jimenez, Van Dijk with the one bonus, and Doherty with the assist were basically the only things that I got this week. Son blanking was also a little bit annoying, but given the captaincy that was going off there, I kind of was slightly pleased about that in a kind of perverse way. But yeah, it just wasn't particularly great, was it? It was just one of those weeks where none of the differentials I have fired, didn't have Rondon, didn't have Deulofeu or anything like that, and it just didn't really work out for me. And Nick, finally, how did you do?
Yeah, pretty terribly too, to be honest. I got a 39, but a -4 as well. So it's a red arrow, just a small one in the end. But yeah, not happy with that. Just ended up fielding 10 men actually because Wan-Bissaka was injured. And yeah, I mean, Robertson got 8 points, which is quite nice, I guess. Doherty got 5 and Jimenez 7. And Natovic got an assist after coming off the bench, but that's about it. My transfers didn't really go to plan, to be honest. Pereira getting a 0 was pretty painful. But yeah, not the best of game weeks, but luckily we've got more games this week, so we can move swiftly on, can't we?
Yeah, exactly. Right, shall we quickly do a market forces, Nick? Just to talk about kind of how people have started to react to this game week just gone before we segue into the questions that we received this week. So there's a talking point that comes out as market forces, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to the market forces, this game week doesn't look like anyone's really thinking about game week 31. Instead, it's all about the Manchester City assets. And it's an interesting one, really, because I feel like all these transfers kind of broke the Austin rule to a certain extent, because the majority of them have been done prior to the League Cup final, which went to 120 minutes in the end. And the two most transferred in players, Aguero with 67,000 transfers time recording, and Sterling 29,000 transfers, all played 120 minutes. And the third man, who I also own annoyingly, Laporte, went off at half-time with a hamstring injury, and he's already had 27,000 transfers in. But I think we wanted to talk firstly about Aguero and who's being sold, which is Aubameyang, who's had 39,000 transfers out at this moment in time. And I guess for myself, I don't really see this as a very good move at all, to be honest. I mean, obviously, Aguero doesn't have a game week 31, so I mean, it makes sense, I guess, if you're planning your free hits in 31 or you're planning your wild card in advance of that. But I would have held off. I'd have waited to see what happens in the League Cup final, because it's highly likely that Aguero might even be rested. Aubameyang didn't play, but I would expect him to start against Bournemouth at home in the midweek fixture. And then if you want to do that move, do it after the midweek fixtures before the North London derby. But for me, it didn't really make sense as a sensible move. And I disagree with the market on this occasion, but I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I think it's mad. I think it's completely mad. Like Aguero's obviously played the 120 minutes. He might be benched from the start. You know, I've never want to try and second guess Pep, but at the very least, you'd think he's going to have his minutes managed. And Aubameyang's got a plum fixture. Aguero's obviously got a good fixture as well, but yeah, I wouldn't be a move that I'd be making for sure. You'd expect Aubameyang to come and start midweek. So yeah, I think it's a very strange one. And so it's another one where, you know, Aguero could have got injured today, so why make the move early? There isn't really a reason to do that. So, but at least he didn't do that, and so I've already got Aguero, so I'm quite happy to hold him. He was going to be my captain until he played 120 minutes, so I probably won't captain him now. But yeah, I think that I wouldn't be making the Aubameyang switch for sure. What about you, Tom?
No, it definitely makes sense. No, I think that there's kind of two issues here. We'll talk about the second one in a minute, which is about Man City and that 120 minutes you just mentioned, Will. In terms of Aubameyang being sold for Aguero, I mean, the fact he didn't play today and didn't came on to 76th, 77th minute for Iwobi, you look at that as an Aubameyang owner and think, well, he's nailed on for the next game. You'd hope hopefully Emery doesn't do a Pep. And he's also playing Bournemouth. Now, Bournemouth, for example, are top for big chances conceded over the last 6 away games. And it's been pretty well noted that away from home, they find it very hard to defend. They find it very hard to defend against most top 6 teams. And Aubameyang himself, though, it's been much vaunted that, for example, you know, XG-wise, he's been underperforming that for a very long time. And you know, even over the last 6 home matches, he's still top for big chances their players have with 9. That's more than Aguero. He's only scored 1 of them. And the thing with Aubameyang seems to be that, you know, we did put out this narrative, didn't we, that perhaps he's a clinical finisher and perhaps he's one of those players that if he gets in the right positions and he can finish the chances. But the more I've had him this season, I've had him at the expense of owning Aguero for so long, and I've held the faith of him. But the more I watch him, the more frustrated I get. I'm just like, dude, come on, like you're 3 yards out. Like, well, how have you missed that? I'm just hoping that it will be the one week where it all comes together. You know, I sold Salah in similar circumstances where he was statting very well, and the final killer stat wasn't quite happening, and gave up the ghost at that moment. I think that for me, I'm not going to be getting Aguero this week. I'm going to be sticking with Aubameyang, and I'm going to be sticking the captaincy on Aubameyang.
Yeah,
as well.
If I had him, he would definitely be my captain. I think
just that Bournemouth game.
That's a plum fixture of the year, really. Well, apart from maybe Fulham and Huddersfield, but yeah, they look there for the taking for the big team for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the big point here is Man City. I think we should probably move on to that unless you've got anything to say there, Nick.
No, I think we've had a few questions from the chat already about Manchester City anyway, about Pep roulette, and if we think it's a worry, or if we think that because they're chasing the title, Manchester City will still, or Pep will still play their best team. We've also had a question about Leroy Sané in particular, and whether he's going to be starting. And that's an interesting one, because I think personally that Sané will start. I know you're an owner, Tom, and you've kept the faith in Sané as well, under an expectation perhaps that he will start the next game. As a Sterling owner, I'm a bit concerned about him starting. I've got a feeling he might not play because there's also Riyad Mahrez, and you know, Pep's talked publicly about wishing that he'd given Mahrez more game time, and you know, he's a quality player, he deserves more game time. So I wouldn't be surprised as well if Mahrez starts. I think Gabriel Jesus is injured though, isn't he, at the moment? So maybe Aguero could still get away and still play, but it has to be down to how fatigued they're all feeling. And you know, at the end of the day, we don't know for sure how they all looked. But I'm sure there'll definitely be some rotation in that next game.
Yeah, it's definitely going to bite soon, isn't it? I mean, West Ham are one of those teams, aren't they, that they are capable of defending well on their day. You've got to hope, kind of, if you are going all in on City here, they're not going to pull off a defensive masterclass. And away from home, they've conceded 20 big chances. So they're still, which is kind of, I think it's joint third that was when I looked at it earlier. So they're still a team that you'd expect Man City to be able to steamroller. It's just whether they've got the wherewithal to do it. I think with the kind of boosted by the cup win, you're kind of looking at potentially quite a decent outcome there. I mean, you mentioned a second ago, I've still got Leroy Sané, still got him sat in my team. Didn't want to sell him this week, and I think I was saying to you guys on our Slack, wasn't I? Oh, should I get rid of him for Felipe Anderson? I decided not to, just because I thought, well, hopefully we'll play West Ham. I mean, he's still, for example, top for big chances created in the last 6 home games amongst midfielders. And on his day, you know what Sané can do, and he's had a few periods of playing very, very well. I've got to hope that that's going to be a decent differential. It's almost like a differential. Me and the FPL TV were talking about this. It's almost like a differential by mistake now, Leroy Sané, because I haven't sold him. So I might as well keep hold of him over the next kind of few game weeks. And I can kind of see, going back to Canaguero, why people are maybe moving the City players in with the anticipation of that 32 double game week that could be Cardiff and Fulham if they beat Swansea. I mean, even if not, they've got Fulham. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, Will, what are you thinking about doing? I mean, you've got a Canaguero, haven't you? Like, you thinking of putting anyone else in for Man City?
I've already got him, and I think Sané, he's surely got to play. Surely got to play at midweek. So yeah, I'll definitely be keeping him. I think that it's generally like the midfielders are probably more at risk. So I think Sterling could definitely get benched. As you say, there isn't too many more options up front for Pep. So you'd think Aguero is going to get some minutes, but they're probably going to get managed. I don't actually know about Jesus. I know that there are rumours that he was coming back. He's probably not going to be fit for midweek, I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, one to keep an eye on for the pressers for sure.
Didn't he have a picture of himself coming to London? I think he put that on. So maybe he was there watching. Maybe they're watching rather than playing.
Yeah,
he's got to start to eventually, I'm sure, take some time off Aguero. But yeah, it's definitely one of those that. I mean, a few people have been saying, and I think that's definitely true, that Canaguero has been the #1 pick and superseded Jesus for Guardiola's love and affection a little while ago. And it was that time, the Jamie Jackson period, when it looked like a little bit more 50-50 between the two of them. So you kind of think that if Jesus isn't available, that apart from playing Sterling or something, you'd be expecting Kun to start. I also noticed there was another injury this week, which affects a few people, including one person on this chat. It is Laporte, who has been injured. And Nick, you had Alonso as well that you were kind of wondering what to do with. And now you've got a bit of an issue with 2 defensive, expensive players.
Well, Alonso actually left my team, Tom.
Oh, he did he?
Yeah, I made the wise choice of swapping Alonso out for Ricardo Pereira. And, we'll talk about Leicester in a little bit. And we won't go into too much detail now. But yeah, I wasn't happy about that move. Though in the League Cup, Emerson started instead of Alonso. So it looks like potentially that Emerson might have superseded Alonso as the first choice in the defence of Chelsea. So in some ways, I'm quite happy that I did get rid of him. But I have a little bit of a defensive crisis. And swinging this back to the market forces a little bit, we've had 27,000 transfers in already for Laporte, as I mentioned, which is a bit worrying for those that brought him in, because he's not going to start in the midweek, I'd highly expect, because of the fact that he got injured with a suspected hamstring injury in the match today. And also the most transferred out player I also own, which is Wan-Bissaka, perhaps someone in everyone's team. He's out as well with a hamstring injury. He's had over 73,000 transfers out at time of recording. So there's a bit of a defensive crisis going on there. I'm going to have to start thinking about who I'm bringing in. Haven't really given it too much thought actually at the moment. I'm probably potentially going to still roll it and risk it with a 3-man defence. But a little bit concerning, definitely. But I think for me, Laporte will be leaving the team because Manchester City have a blanket 31. It's just kind of wait and see what Pep says and go from there. There's a few options out there. Perhaps a Newcastle defender like Lascelles maybe would be an interesting option at this moment in time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with Laporte out as well on the double game week, if Laporte's still injured, then that also opens the door to players like John Stones at 5.2, who has a very similar skill set to Laporte, the ball playing defender. You may expect him to play a couple of games, and that could be a very nice little kind of value addition for a few managers. Same price as TAA, of course.
It's quite cheap, isn't it? Around 5?
Yeah, 5.2 Stones.
Potentially, I mean, he is flagged as well. He wasn't in the squad for the League Cup final. Otamendi is a bit expensive at 6.0, but he looks perhaps the most nailed on now if Laporte is injured. And there's also, of course, the captain and leader Vincent Kompany lifting the trophy today, 5.2. A little bit of a differential pick, but yeah, for now, I think with the looming Game Week 31, because I'm not planning on wild carding or free hitting, I'm probably going to be foregoing the Manchester City defence and looking elsewhere in my particular plans.
Yeah, don't blame you. I just think it's the next three. Well, especially that I guess you'd be saying to people with West Ham home, Bournemouth away, and Watford at home for the next three, that people shouldn't be sleeping on Man City despite having that looming 31 still in front of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing my free hit in 31, so I'm very much in favour of getting City. And but obviously it depends on your strategy, and I do think that we can overplan in some ways, even if you are planning for the blank game with 31. So I do think it's viable to get City, but it's a bit tricky this game week, obviously, because they played the 120 minutes and you don't know who's going to start. And yeah, Pep does a lot of rotation. So I probably wouldn't be doing it this game week, but there's certainly chance for another cheeky hokey cokey.
Yeah, I'm always instinctively against those, and I found myself on double game week. Even though I was in Florida, chilled out, smashed off my face in a theme park, I still found myself thinking, "Oh, if only I had done your boomerang. If only I had done that. If only that had occurred to me. Either that or triple captioning the port." Just a final word before we move on to the questions that we've got, and then we'll take some questions from the chat after that. On the Pep roulette, because that's something that does come up an awful lot, and it does kind of mean that for example, Villaronca throughout the Christmas period had no Man City players apart from Ederson, so a lot of people have been completely put off by the risk. Like, do you think the risk is one worth taking, or is it just one that you're kind of happy to shy away from and hope that other players, for example Mo Salah, pick up the slack from City's players? Either one.
Yeah, I think it is worth taking the risk. It's you obviously got to pick the players which are less likely to get rotated. I know that's a complete nightmare to know exactly who that's going to be with Pep, but at the moment, so long as Jesus stays out, then it looks like Aguero is the first choice. So it looks like that going him's going to be a good route. I've also got Ederson, and he's obviously.
You suffered through that. Also, how long have you had him for?
No, I brought him in for the double that we had. So
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I quite like to do that for blanks and doubles. Make sure you have a couple of goalkeepers that sort of rotate quite nicely. That's a tactic which generally works pretty well for me. And although I've got Ederson and Fabianski at the moment, so generally I don't really like to spend that much on goalkeepers, but I'm probably going to keep it now until the next wild card, which I'll be doing after the double game week 32. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think with Manchester City, it is worth kind of, handling that rotation and just going through it, I guess. They are the most dominant team in the league in terms of attacking threats. 74 goals, which is most in the league, only 15 more than Liverpool. In terms of goal attempts, well, they've had 463 compared to Chelsea's 406 and Liverpool's 399. So, they're always going to score. And I think it depends on the player to a certain extent. There's the likes of Leroy Sané, and I think maybe if he's not being picked, then perhaps you kind of have to think about selling him. Maybe not this week, like we talked about, because he possibly will start. But, likes of Sterling and Aguero, Pep is going for the title, and these guys are going to play more games than not play. And I think they are worth holding, even if they are going to potentially miss the next fixture. Because, like with Sterling, I mean, he has actually started sort of 8 of the last 9 games. So he is nailed on really within that team. He'll get the occasional rest, and he might get a rest midweek, but he's one of their key men. And I'm probably going to hold him through this fixture. Hope he starts or at least gets some minutes. And, I'm not thinking about selling him at this moment in time.
Well, what's your midfield then, Nick? I don't know how you've managed to fit Sterling in, because I've been wanting to bring him in, but You know, you've got Pogba, Salah, and Son. It's
it's quite an expensive midfield. I don't have a premium forward though, so I've got Son, Salah, Sterling, and Pogba. But at the moment, my front line is Jimenez, Arnautovic, and Rashford. So that's why I don't have Aubameyang or Aguero in my team. I'm able to afford Sterling, and I'm quite happy with that setup, to be honest. I mean, Sterling to a certain extent covered Aguero during that those last few games and in the double game week. So you know, it's worked out all right for me.
Yeah.
I think overall, like I think with Kun and Sterling particularly, you've got as nailed as they can be within that team, plus have the FPL points output. And Dan FPL Chancellor made a point in the chat as well that the points return for you is going to outweigh your worry about the occasional dropping. It's kind of like, you know, they're going to do this, aren't they? It's just that the overall kind of average is going to be higher because of what Man City can produce. I think let's continue this on with the first kind of question we got from Twitter, which was about reacting to game week 27. A lot of people said, you know, let's just forget about this one official FPL. It's just not happened. It's very, very low. I think it's the lowest average scoring game week of the season so far, actually. Great time to be doing a live cast, isn't it? But KXNG asked the question on many people's minds, which is that seeing as the majority of the FPL community have had a horrendous game week, would it be wise to make decisions based on what happened, or should we stick to the plans if we've made, if any, and just roll with the punches? I think we're probably all going to agree on this, but let's see. Nick, how are you reacting to this game week? Are your plans up in disarray, or are you still coldly sticking to what you're doing?
Well, I'm sort of coldly sticking to what I'm doing, but I have to take into account what happened this game week, because there's been a little bit of an injury crisis, which has unfortunately developed. So whilst my original plans, I was thinking about rolling or maybe just doing a Wan-Bissaka transfer out, I'm now potentially thinking about a -4, actually. So to a certain extent, despite it being a low-scoring game week, that bothers me less. I'm more bothered about the fact that my team's now looking a bit misshapen, and I think you have to take into account what happened this week. For instance, I think I rubbished Burnley to a certain extent in the last pod, which meant, of course, they would go ahead and beat my team Spurs. And now looking at Rashford, I've actually thought maybe I could look at Ashley Barnes. He scored 4 goals in a row, and he could be a really good swap for Rashford maybe this week. And you know, there's other questions that have arisen this game week. Leicester, for instance, they were pretty damn terrible, but we'll talk about them in a second anyway. But at first instance, it makes their assets less attractive. But I think genuinely, my advice would be to stick to your plans. And unless you're doubled up on the Watford and Palace attack, everyone had a terrible game week, and there's not really too much to say apart from except the fact there's low scoring week, and focus on what you're doing and look at the midweek fixtures and then figure out your plans from there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I'm a big believer in that. You know, we don't really care about last week's points. I mean, obviously they sort of come into the factors in your decision, but you know, those points are gone. They don't really matter. What matters more is future points potential. And so yeah, you've got to look at your team and if it's well set up for next game week, which I'm fairly happy with mine. I'm probably going to be banking a transfer depending on Rashford news, but it looks like he's just got a knock. So even if he is out, I'll probably still bank a transfer and then just reassess it after that. So yeah, kind of standard response really. Just be patient. Don't have a big reaction and go taking all out your players. You got them in for a reason, and it's probably very wise not to go spending lots of points and getting rid of all of them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's just a case of looking at it and thinking, yeah, it was a bad game week. And if you've had a bad game week, it's a good game week to have a bad game week.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the average was so low. I wouldn't dwell on it too much. I mean, as Nick said, if there are players who for you cause an issue or for you put a bit of a spanner in your plans, like, for example, you know, with changing from removing AWB to probably having to play with that Laporte money, then fair enough. That's just part and parcel of being an FPL manager. But I think sometimes you do get game weeks like this, and the worst ones are the weeks where, and believe me, I've had a lot of these, where people are all scoring 80 and 90 and you're sitting there on 50 or 60 thinking, where did it all go wrong? Why am I doing this? Why do I want a podcast? So I wouldn't worry too much about it. And I think that perhaps in some ways it'd be more instructive looking at what happens midweek with a lot of these players, because in some ways you're going to see almost like a dry run of a double game week for a few teams, where which players are going to be fit enough to play 2 games in a row, and this will be true of the entire calendar week coming up. Like, which players are fit enough to be playing all of those games, which players are fit enough to be producing in all those games, or at least threatening to produce in all of those games. And the final point I'd like to say is Ashley Barnes. Like, it's absolutely, we picked him up a few weeks ago to some opprobrium, but he is outstatting him like at that price point incredibly well. Like, really over the last 6 game weeks, absolutely astonishing stuff. 19 shots, 18 in the box, 6 big chances, 9 of those shots on target. That's really getting there. He's 4th for shots on shots in the box, for example, over the last 6. He's had more shots in the box than the likes of Raul Jimenez, Rashford, Aguero, and Lacazette. Which, yeah, that's pretty crazy for a Burnley player. I know they've got a kind of a bit of a splintered time ahead of them, but the next 2 are looking okay. At Newcastle and Crystal Palace, and they got Liverpool, but they also have a 31 and a 33 game. So if you are building towards that kind of setup, then why not look at Ashley Barnes, especially if you've got an issue like Rashford that you want to get rid of. If he does have a bit of a problem, then you may be thinking, because the game weeks are so close together, then that means he misses 28 and probably also 29 if it's a bad hamstring kind of thingy going on. Watch Ben Crellin. So maybe Barnes would be the one who's going to fit a lot of people's needs. There's also Rondon, my bet noir, who does look a little bit better with Almiron in the team. Right. So, yeah, I think that all of us say roll with the punches and hope that tomorrow is a better day. The next question is on Leicester, as Nick was inferring. So, post-Puel purchases, FPL Waterloo, so Charlie asked if Leicester assets are more attractive after Claude Puel, the Green Gots Goblin, has been sacked. Interesting one. And Nick, you bought Pereira in this week. I bought in Chilwell, didn't even get on the pitch. Will, did you have any Leicester players?
Yeah, did the brilliant transfer.
Did the Pereira? I thought you did. Yeah.
So yeah.
So what are our views on Leicester? Are we going to do more, or are we happy with just the one asset? Or would you be advising people to jump on if they don't have any at all?
I think they're looking like a great investment at the moment. I mean, you've nearly always have sort of a new manager boost. Players fighting to play for the new manager, and they're motivated, and players like Pereira I think are great bets. Actually, I'm very happy to own him despite not getting off to a good start. And then obviously you've got Maddison. He's been doing really well on the stats as well. And then I think Vardy has also got a point to prove. There's a lot of good budget options. You mentioned Barnes and Rondon there as well. So maybe people might not want to stretch to Vardy, but I think he's got a good shout. And they've got the fixtures as well. Like, they've got a ridiculous run of fixtures, and they obviously play in 31 and 33 as well. So yeah, I think that Leicester look like they're going to be a great investment.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is interesting, actually, because I looked at their form, though, and it has been pretty dreadful.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
is 15 goals conceded in the last 6 game weeks is the worst in the league, surprisingly, even worse than Fulham and Huddersfield. Though, unbelievably, actually, in terms of shots conceded, it was only 59, which is the 4th best. And it does raise question about the likes of Kasper Schmeichel, who was one of the most vocal critics via his father, whether he'll start saving shots again. But we'll have to see there. But yeah, generally they have been a team devoid of form, and that terrible result Palace sums up. I think we will see that there's going to be a potential for a new manager bounce. We actually saw it previously with Craig Shakespeare when he became the Leicester manager. They won their first 4 games on the trot, and he started the tenor with a 3-1 victory against Liverpool. But it'll be very interesting to watch. For now, I think I'll probably hold Pereira for this week. Not going to rush to get another Leicester player in, but it'll be very interesting to see, what happens with the new manager, and also who plays, because, for instance, Harvey Barnes is someone who I've been touting a little bit as a really good option. He might suddenly find himself out of favour with the new manager. He might prefer Damari Gray and Rashid Ghazal as the first choice wingers. So it'll be interesting. I think there's definitely options out there, like, mentioned Maddison's perhaps a really decent pick, though he's got great underlying stats, as I'm sure Tom will mention in a second. But, and Vardy as well is another pick, though he's quite expensive. But I think for me, Pereira I'm quite glad he's in my team, even though he got me a 0-pointer, because I'm sure there's going to be returns in the next few game weeks with that great fixture run, as you mentioned, Will.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely one of those where, like, you got to bear the context in mind. I guess with the new manager, it's looking like actually that a few of their targets, as like, Rafa Benitez and Brendan Rodgers, are the ones who are being mooted at this point in time. I don't think they would be moving mid-season without a transfer window. So I'm guessing what we'd see maybe is the coaches taking charge or somebody like some sort of caretaker thing going on. If they do bring a new manager in, then I think maybe, Will, you're right. Like there may be a little bit of that sort of thing going on with the players are trying to kind of impress. And there are a few options. You've got players like James Maddison, of course, who is topping the charts for attempts amongst midfielders in the last 6 home matches. And overall, he's created the most chances of all midfielders, 24 of those, creating a chance every 21 minutes, which is equal to Robert Snodgrass, one of your favourite players of old, Nick. With Leicester, it's very much the case of whether the malaise is driven by the manager or driven by the players. So, like under Ranieri, the Ranieri to Shakespeare sort of transition, they were playing pretty abjectly under Ranieri. Shakespeare came in, they started playing very, very well. Last season, the moment they got safe, I remember, Nick, you and I were talking about the Leicester players, and they were saying with Mahrez towards the end of the season. They had great fixtures, I think, towards the end of last season. They only had Spurs and game week 38 as the one game maybe you get off them. But those were the players those are some of the players that we were thinking, yeah, that's really worth it. But after they got safe, they were on the beach. Like between game weeks 30 and 37, I don't think they won a game. They weren't very good at all. And I'm just kind of wondering whether, if it is the existing coaching team in charge, if the new manager's put off until May, whether they may just kind of drift towards kind of some sort of vague safety. There may be some wins in the intervening period. I'm happy to own one player. I'd be happy with Pereira. Don't know whether we'll see him out of position anymore, because that's where he played under Puel at Nice and AMR. So I don't know whether that's going to continue again under the new manager. But I don't know whether I want more than one. Like, I think Maddison would do a job. It's just the fact that I don't know. I think he would feature in a game week 31 or a 33 free hit team for me. I don't think he'd feature in a team of players, especially with. I mean, if you heard about Nick's midfield earlier, a team of fairly decent midfield options. I'm not sure that he's quite pushing that yet. And Vardy, I've owned Vardy so many times throughout the course of the years. I mean, apart from the one season when he was obviously fantastic, the rest of the time he's a very, very frustrating player to own. Is our old rat face. Like he's got like one attempt per game, 2 attempts per game, and that's it. The ceiling's very low. The kind of style of player he is, so he'll get you 1 goal and that would be it. He's like, I'm done, apart from if I get a penalty. And if he gets a penalty, all he does is wallops it as hard as he can straight ahead of him. Most goalkeepers have probably worked it out right now. I'm going to do my words. He's going to get a hat-trick next week, isn't he? But a very frustrating player to own, and because there's a plethora of cheaper mid-price forwards hanging around, I'm not too sure I'd be too interested in Vardy. So it does kind of feel like Pereira / maybe Chilwell, who, if you have a little bit less to spend, or maybe Maguire even, are the players there. In midfield, you'd be looking at Maddison, but probably no one else. And then up front, Vardy. I don't know. It feels like when we boil it down to the actual players that are there, you only really want one Leicester, don't you?
I think I might get Maddison in. I've got a Richarlison-shaped hole in my team right now. So, Maddison is one of the players that I'm looking at for sure. But, yeah, I'd probably like to see one game and then see how they react to make my choice. But, yeah, I like Maddison a lot. Probably wouldn't go Vardy. But, yeah, I'm happy with Pereira. But I wouldn't go more than 2 for sure. But, yeah, Maddison's definitely on quite high up on my watch list.
I think the style of football as well was one that may change a little bit. Puel ships a lot of flack for having a fairly pragmatic style, didn't he? And one that didn't really suit the players they had at his disposal. Who knows? Maybe even see Iheanacho come back to fruition or something like that. All right. Next question then, Nick, unless you've got anything to add to that.
No, I'm happy to move on. I think, in your situation, Will, Maddison would be a really good pick, potentially around that price point. For myself, I'm happy with the single Leicester player. I don't think I'm ready for the double up. And like you mentioned, Tom, last season, I had Mahrez and Morgan on my wild card. It was a bit of a disaster. It was part of a generally disastrous second wild card. So I'm very wary of a team, especially when you're looking at bringing in players from a team that haven't been informed. But like I said, Puel's now gone, you know, Schmeichel and his family and the rest of them have won their victory. So, you know, we might suddenly see an informed Leicester like we did with Manchester United very oddly when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer took over. So, you know, well, it's a wait and see. And with those fixtures, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Leicester change things around. But for me, I'm happy with the one player. But yeah, the next question is about Fulham and Huddersfield and whether they're in the crosshairs. And FPL Stag asked, should we just sack off the planning and keep targeting these two hapless sides? Do you want to start on this one, Will?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think they fit quite nicely into planning in terms of sort of targeting them. I mean, I know that they've got they both play in the blanks and doubles, and let me just check their fixtures. So yeah, they've got West Ham obviously playing Huddersfield in the blank game week 31, and Liverpool have got Fulham. So there you've got, you know, if you want to target those teams and also fit in with your game week 31 plan, then West Ham players look like a good shout. So I think that, yeah, target those teams, but also try and fit them in with your plans. Why not do both?
I do get that, and I think that we are kind of helped out by the fact that Huddersfield's next game is at home to Wolves, and most of us, if not all of us, have got Jimenez and Doherty in situ. What I do think, though, and I think that what Stag's hit on here is the fact that it's always good, and FFS will often talk about the whipping boys as well. Like, it's very, very important to have that in mind. Like, these are teams that have abjectly just failed in the Premier League. You know, they are Championship standard teams, and when you do have kind of mid-table teams playing against them, it's always a good idea to kind of back up that kind of thing. If you can make the one transfer, the two transfers, just to get one guy in is actually quite nice.
Yeah.
Maybe there is an element of luck involved. I know there's a lot of Felipe Anderson owners and buyers probably screaming at me right now saying that, oh God. But nonetheless, I think that there's always a good chance of getting something out of it. Like, I always pull back to this, but a few years ago when Aston Villa were on their way out of the Premier League, I adopted a target Villa approach, and that part of that included buying Troy Deeney on a -8 because he was at home to Villa and he got like a last-minute brace, which is obviously very lucky. But at the same time, those sort of things are more likely to happen. It's always nice to have that sort of like set up against teams like this. And there are a few kind of salient moments, I think, during the end of the season when maybe you'd be looking at Huddersfield and Fulham as teams that you may be targeting. You know, Liverpool in game week 31. That game against Fulham, my lord, that's going to be Mo Salah captain heaven, basically. Yeah. Like, everyone's going to be captaining Mo Salah, and I think that maybe the impact of game week 31 is going to be diminished to some extent by that. They've got a few dodgy fixtures towards the end of the season as well. They got the Man City during the double game week 2, and Huddersfield, I think, Liverpool and Man United game week 36 and 37. So there's definitely potentials for gains. There's always that kind of backup captaincy for Mo Salah as well in game week 36 for triple captain if you can't fit it into your chip plan. But targeting these sorts of teams, like in the start of the season, you want to kind of get a team which is in a downward kind of trend, but thinking, well, probably they're going to get themselves out of it. Burnley, for example, were an example of a team that were doing pretty poorly for a little while and then seem to have reasserted themselves. But during that poor period, target them. And I think that towards the end of the season, we see a terminal decline, and having those sorts of players, targeting those sorts of teams with your players is probably a good idea. Nick, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with both of you, and I'd potentially say after that mauling by Watford, you could also add Cardiff to pick as well, because in terms of goals conceded, Cardiff have 52 compared to Huddersfield's 50, and Fulham 61. But I think definitely with Fulham and Huddersfield particularly, though, you know, they're probably not going to, well, Huddersfield are definitely not going to survive, and Fulham probably aren't going to survive too. So at some point they're going to give up the ghost and essentially just be playing for the sake of playing, and both of them are pretty abhorrent defensively. So I think you can make a case for targeting these teams, but you can also incorporate that into your plans. And I think you can do both of those rather than just simply targeting them. You could definitely link it to what you're planning. For instance, we mentioned Wolves play Huddersfield, so it makes sense to hold the Wolves players for that week. But come game week 30, you can do quite a decent swap for the Wolves players for the Bournemouth players, because Bournemouth then play Huddersfield that week, and that's when I'm planning a sort of Jimenez Josh King move. And Leicester also play Fulham that week, so you could easily go for a double up or triple up with Leicester at that particular moment in time. And then in 31, we mentioned West Ham and Liverpool play both sides, so I would target obviously those teams for those games if you're not already having targeted them in your plans. I've already got the double West Ham and already got the double Liverpool, so I've already, to a certain extent, ready for that week. But there's no point going too silly. For instance, I'm not going to be bringing in like Southampton and Brighton players for the next couple of weeks, even though they're playing the teams, because those teams aren't much better, to be honest, anyway. So it doesn't really make too much sense to go too silly in terms of targeting teams and bringing in Southampton players because they've got Fulham at home. But I know you've got Bednarek and you're probably going to play him, and that kind of makes sense to a certain extent, Tom. But I wouldn't go transferring in Redmond or something like that just for the sake of the fixture.
No, definitely not. But I think there's still enough there, and I think there's a quick point to be made as well that double game week wise, they are going to start to form a very, very big part of our planning, aren't they? Because like if you see a team's got a double, if either one of these teams are part of that double game week, you've got to be thinking, well, all right, I've got one kind of very good fixture in that double game week, and then I've got a free hit, effectively. Not a free hit in the chip, obviously, but it doesn't really matter what happens in that second game, because in the first game, like I could feasibly get something very nice out of that. A couple of teams to draw your attention to then. The first is obviously Man City with the Fulham and Cardiff. The second is Watford. The game week 35 double game week could potentially be Huddersfield away and Fulham at home. So triple Watford, game week 35. Nick sitting there with the triple captain on Troy Deeney, perhaps. But that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And I think that like the beauty of this sort of time period and the beauty of having a couple of teams who are nailed in as being troubled teams means that you can kind of think, well, all right, how am I going to look at double game weeks, and is there an opportunity to create an advantage or find an advantage? And maybe something like Watford having a few more of their guys, and the beauty of them is they're quite cheap. Having a few of their guys, if they've got an easy double game week, maybe a way of looking at it, and maybe a way of managing it. All right, next question then is about cheap strikers. We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but with Rashford's knock, and if we think that maybe, I think it's a twisted ankle or something like that, if people are looking to maybe get rid of, people looking at cheap strikers generally, which cheap strikers we nominate as being worth our consideration? So we've got players like Rondon, players like Arnautovic, the beloved Ashley Barnes, who's the number one Austrian striker in claret and blue, let's be fair, New Zealand's Chris Wood, and England's Joshua King. So who is on our radars, guys? Who are we looking at, and who would be recommending people to have a look at?
Well, I think there's a lot of good options, actually, isn't there? I mean, there's four things that I tend to look at when I'm looking at a transfer, and that is fixtures, form, underlying stats, and value. And Rondon, straight off the bat there, brilliant fixtures, great form, really good underlying stats. Like I think it's 13 attempts in the last 4 game weeks, and obviously great value. So he ticks all the boxes. Same with Barnes, to be honest. I mean, he's got everything as well. He's got 14 attempts over the last 4 game weeks, and that's right up there with the best strikers. And obviously, he's got decent fixtures, really good form, underlying stats obviously there as well, and value. So yeah, those two are probably my pick of the two. King is the other one that I quite like. He's got a couple of tough fixtures coming up, but after that, he's obviously good for the blank game 31. So yeah, I'd look at getting King in, but not for the next 2. Probably hold off for a moment. Arnautovic, he's the wild card, really. Obviously, a brilliant game in game week 31. My worry with him is he's just so injury prone. And when you're going into blanks and doubles, you really, really want all of your players to be playing. And so he's a big risk, but potentially the biggest reward. So all 4 of them got their merits. And yeah, I like all 4 of those. To be honest, I wouldn't even consider Wood. Not good numbers, and Barnes looks the pick from Burnley. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think generally you made some really good points there. gone for Arnautovic, obviously. I can see he is definitely a risky asset. He didn't actually start this week, though when he came on, he looked like such a threat. He was so dangerous, and he managed to pick up an assist. Could easily got a couple of goals as well. Rico made his only good save of the season, which was a bit annoying, which prevented Arnautovic from scoring. But I really like him as a pick. And
so you've already got him, have you?
Yeah, I brought him in this week. For the Fulham match, and they've got Manchester City up next, so it wouldn't be the week to bring him in. But after that, Newcastle, Cardiff, Huddersfield, we talked about targeting teams. That's a great run of 3 fixtures for West Ham, and I think he's a really good pick. I'm also a big fan of King as well. As you mentioned, I'm planning the sort of a front three of King, Barnes and Arnie, so really not the time for me to start talking about my pre-season theories around death of the third striker, considering I'm planning on loading up on 3 cheapies for the game week 31. And I thought it was worth actually mentioning another player who wasn't mentioned so far. It was a quick shout out to Mitrovic, the 6.5 million man. He's actually got more goals than any of the ones we've mentioned so far, and he's also top for all forwards with shots with 93, and second for shots on target with 33. And Fulham have no blank as well, so it's worth mentioning this guy, though Fulham's fixtures are pretty tough. I mean, they've got Southampton up next, but after that it's Chelsea, Leicester, Liverpool. So maybe, you know, there are better options out there, but he's definitely worth thinking about too.
I think I got bored of thinking about Mitrovic around Christmas time, and I've not thought about him since. So I think it's just one of those, isn't he? Another man that I thought I'd be bored of for the rest of my life, Salomon Rondon. Again, they're showing up in the stats, and I think he'd be very much helped out by Almiron. I think I saw a stat that he created more chances in one game, Almiron, than any Newcastle player had for at least 3 or 4 years.
He looked really good, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He really did. Like, he's a Football Manager hero of mine. I always purchase him from the US.
Yeah,
and I'm very excited to see what will happen there. It looks like he's a sort of player who may really bring the Rondon to life. I mean, the last kind of 6 game weeks, Rondon's top for attempts amongst strikers. He's top for attempts in the box amongst strikers. Dare I say it, but the Venezuelan may be a bit of an option going forward. You obviously mentioned a few. We've mentioned Barnes. Probably not mentioned. I wouldn't touch Chris Wood. A couple of people that I don't think have got that many mentions so far. Wolf Zaha. I think that he's looking like behind Batshuayi in a better position there. Like, it's kind of a bit like Benteke used to be. Gives him that space and gives him that kind of license to really wreak havoc behind him. And he's showing up again in the stats as Mr. Zaha. He's had the most pen box touches of any striker over the last 6. And Batshuayi himself, Nick, I think you were quite pro Batshuayi at one point. He's only had 3 appearances, Batshuayi, but he's had 9 shots during those 3 appearances and had 6 of those in the box. So I think there are a few decent options actually out there, and there's actually a little bit of scope as well if Rashford is injured to maybe differentiate and go off and do something slightly different. And it obviously just depends a little bit on your strategy. So if it is a 31, if you are kind of managing your way up to 31, you're going to free hit in 32, you would probably be looking at players like Ashley Barnes. Probably, maybe not time for Josh King yet, but he would be in consideration. Maybe you'd be thinking about Mitrovic. Maybe you'd be thinking about Arnautovic. But yeah, it's certainly an area where there are a few options, and we saw this weekend that these options are capable of doing something. Like, if there is a Newcastle resurgence, for example, the next 4 they've got quite decent fixtures. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think definitely it seems to be a boon for the third strikers right now. We've mentioned in the chat, Joe Finley Bars has just mentioned Troy Deeney, of course, in the chat as well, and he smashed it this week. And then there's our man Jimenez, who we all own as well, who's been pretty cheap option and sort of the leading man, perhaps for the third striker for most of the season, though many of us will be selling him as opposed to bringing him in at this moment in time. So definitely, I think right now it's the time for the third striker. Let's see what they can do. Let's see how they perform, especially in the lead up to a game week 31 where most of the top sides aren't actually playing. And I think, you've both made some really good points in terms of the options out there. And ultimately, it's tough. But I think with Newcastle, we'll have to see. Rondon, very interesting pick, and we saw that the Newcastle forwards were right at the top of that selfish index when we did the analysis. So it'll be very interesting to see if Almiron sort of unlocks the Newcastle frontline creatively. But yeah, it's
I quite like yours a harsh shout, actually, Tom. Look, for if you're doing my strategy and doing the free hit in game week 31, then Crystal Palace are likely to have a nice double in game week 32, and they got good fixtures around that. So not for this week. I think we got Man United, but yeah, some nice fixtures there for Zaha. So
yeah, I wouldn't be too adverse to buying Zaha against Man United either. I mean, admittedly, they have just kept out Liverpool. Let's be fair, but yeah, you've always got the old club thing, and you've always got the fact that Man United have not been the most solid defensively over the course of OGS's reign. So I think that wouldn't be too bad. As you mentioned, Palace have got a couple of okay double game weeks. They've got one easier fixture and one hard fixture potentially. Like Huddersfield's nailed down as being part of that 32 double game week.
One, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very good. That might be one. I'm on free hit 31, so that might be one that I'd be really looking at. And yeah, I may have just put that out into the world. And there's obviously Batshuayi as well if you're looking to save a little bit more cash, because I think Batshuayi definitely has a point to prove, and his performances have shown that. Right, and the final question from Twitter before we ask kind of chat is the Blanky men. So Neil Gupta, our friend, asks who outside of the top 6 will be the key men for blank game week 31. I think this is probably aimed at people who are looking to free hit in game week 32. So at the moment, they're planning their game week 31 and by consequence, their game week 33 teams. So outside of the key men, we all know about free Liverpool. And I think that Pereira probably is one that we shouldn't really wax lyrical about, because I'm guessing he's one that people are going to know about. Outside of those guys, who are we looking at as being those players who, in a period where you've got a very, very light player pool, as Ben Quellin was talking about last week, maybe the ones that people all kind of flock to? And is there a reason for getting these guys in a little bit earlier just to kind of get a few points out of them? Who's on your list, guys?
Well, I'm not going to be building my team up for blank game theory, but even so, I think that there's quite a few sort of budget options actually. Like you've got obviously Bournemouth, we talked about King. They've got a really nice fixture. West Ham obviously got Huddersfield, Anderson and Arnautovic look like good bets, and obviously Fabianski in goal. And then you've got, Burnley as well. You've got Barnes or possibly Burnley defence. It looks like they're beginning to sort their act out in defence. They've got a nice fixture against Leicester, potentially. Depends how Leicester are doing, I guess, if they're sorted their stuff out. And then obviously you've got the Leicester guys in Maddison and Vardy. I think they're decent shouts. The wild card one is Almiron. I think that he's got the potential to be a really, really strong fantasy asset. I know those that play Major League Soccer fantasy, he was practically essential.
Oh, him and Giovinco, absolute, just little creators, amazing in MLS.
Yeah. So I think that him and Rondon look like good bets. There's quite a few good picks out there. In fact, just looking at that, I'm half debating changing my strategy, but
yeah, we've got.
Let's not go down the strategy.
Yeah, we don't want to do it anymore. I've had enough. I don't know about you guys, but I've just had brain drain, especially after doing the thing with Ben Quellin the other day and really working to boil it down to 2 key things and trying to fit everything in. Oh my lord, like my brain had just completely checked out by Thursday of last week. I just didn't want to know anymore. Nick, what do you reckon? Game week 31. I assume you're still on the first 2 free hit strategy. So what players, apart from the obvious guys, are kind of catching your eye?
So yeah, if we're not looking at the top 6 clubs, which excludes Liverpool and Chelsea, then I guess for me it still remains the West Ham assets. I think there's a few decent options. I mean, we talked quite a bit about the forwards, but Arnautovic, obviously great pick. But I'd also recommend, if you're looking at a goalkeeper, Fabianski, who's been absolutely class this season. I think he's been top for quite a few of the metrics in terms of goalkeepers this season. Yeah, I'm a big fan. But I was also very impressed this game week by Diop, and I thought he played really well in the Fulham game, and he scored a belter of a header, and he's only 4.3 million. So in terms of my picks, I'm kind of looking at the defence to a certain extent, trying to find a new member of my defence that fits into the 31 model. And at the moment, I think the leading men in terms of the people I'm looking at is Diop and Lascelles maybe as well as an option for Newcastle. But Yeah, I mean, it is really about the front line. I think I'm going to go potentially with a cheap front line and then a premium midfield and a relatively cheap defence as my 31 setup.
Yeah, that's definitely where I'm going to be going. I mean, you guys have mentioned a few very, very good options. I think there are a couple to me who, I mean, I'm free hitting in 31, but if I was planning for game week 31, there are two players that I really, really want. The first is Artur Boruc at Bournemouth, and it's so boring to be talking about a goalkeeper, but he's a 4.0 goalkeeper that you can chuck in instead of Ben Hamer. Will probably still have retained the #1 jersey at that point. Bournemouth, as you spoke about last week, in game week 31, they've got Newcastle at home. In game week 32, they've got Burnley at home. I don't know if they're going to keep a clean sheet. Who knows if Bournemouth are going to keep a clean sheet, frankly. But at the end of the day, having a 4.0 playing goalkeeper with decent fixtures is really quite decent. So he would be one who would probably make up a decent kind of spot as well in a bench boost, because if you pay 4.0 for a goalkeeper and he plays one fixture in double game week, that's okay with me. Another one's Ryan Fraser. He started the season incredibly well, created 11 big chances in that game week range 1 to 10, and created 24 chances in that time period. I think it was a chance every 30, 35, 36 minutes, something like that. And at 6.1, you've got to be thinking, well, yeah, there's always going to be space for Ryan Fraser. I think I'll probably prefer him to James Maddison, although the caveat of watching to make sure they're not on the beach is going to be true. I think on the podcast last week that Bournemouth, the first 10 game weeks, had one game against the top 16, which was Chelsea. They lost. Apart from that, they won 6 and drew 2. No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think that they're in their last 10 mirrors their first 10. So they're going to be a team that I think I'd like to get 2 of at least, and I think they're going to be quite useful for a lot of people when trying to manage the transition. So I think that there are a few guys you'd really be looking at, but those two would be my 2, especially Boruc. He, in the same way that Bednarak, who I probably should mention here as being quite a useful player as a 4.0, like the AWB of the end of the season almost, because he is central to Hasenhüttl's defence for some reason, and he has a bit of a goal threat. He scored for me in World Cup Fantasy, for example, and he's just 4.0, and he's got a game in 32 and a game in 33. I think that's good. That's looking quite good. Double game week, sorry, in 32 and 33. That's looking quite good potentially. All right, let's move on to transfers and captains then for this midweek, and we'll answer some questions from the chat afterwards. If you're listening to this after the fact on audio, we're not going to include those, sorry, but you probably got enough from us already, let's be fair. The transfer and captain this week then, guys, what are you looking at doing and who are you looking at captaining? Let's start off with you then, Will. What are you thinking of? You said you're probably going to roll it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it obviously depends on injury news with Rashford and stuff, but unless he's ruled out like definitively for a couple of weeks, then I probably will roll it. And yeah, or potentially ditch Richarlison, although he's against Cardiff this week. So I feel like every single week I'm like, must get rid of Richarlison, and he gives me some kind of reason just to sort of cling on to him. But yeah, so I might ditch Richarlison, but I probably will just give him one final week before he says goodbye, bank a transfer.
Oh, wow. It's like a relic of the old age. I'm going to use my Nokia 3210 for one more day. Fair enough.
Yeah, so I quite like Maddison. There are good other, some decent shouts in that price bracket. But also, I think just having the flexibility of 2 free transfers the following week, and then I'll really be able to assess my team. And I'm pretty certain of my double game and blank strategy, but having 2 frees, it sort of gives you that flexibility to change your mind if you want to. And captain Salah, I don't think, I think he's probably the best shout. Obviously, you've got Aguero, but minutes might be managed. I don't know the Bang, but I'd probably captain him if I did have him. But yeah, I'd probably go into Salah. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to follow you and captain Salah as well. I think he's just a standout pick as sort of an auto captain, even though he seems to be a little bit out of sorts and didn't have the best game today. I still think he's going to be my preferred captaincy choice. In terms of transfers, though, I'm in a bit of a situation, bit of an injury crisis. Always happens at least once a season, but I've got David Brooks injured. I've got Wan-Bissaka injured. I've got Laporte injured now, and I've also got Rashford, who Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would say it's going to be a surprise to see him play midweek. And I've got Raheem Sterling, who I'm not confident at all that he's going to play as well. So it's a bit of a situation I find myself in, which means I'm potentially now going to be looking at a -4, just to kind of shake things up. And just head towards prepping that Game Week 31 team anyway, which I'm a bit short on numbers for anyway. So I think connecting the two kind of works out quite well for me. And in that vein, it's potentially going to be Rashford that leaves the side earlier than planned originally, but he might leave for Ashley Barnes, as I mentioned. And then potentially Laporte will go as well as part of the -4, or maybe Wan-Bissaka, perhaps Wan-Bissaka, because I'm less inclined to keep him. And Laporte might find that he gets himself fit. And I mentioned a couple of the options. I'm still definitely nowhere near certain on who I'm picking for that defensive slot, but the Cells maybe is one of the options that I've mentioned as a possibility. But I still need to do some analysis before I decide for certain what I do.
Yeah, I do love the Cells, actually. I think he's one of those players that has always been a bit like Ashley Barnes, actually, on the periphery of my team for a while. Like, always kind of, I've always thought, yeah, got good fixtures. He's a bonus magnet, always got that goal threat. One of our friends, Tack, always seems to own him during this course of the season, always seems to do well out of him. So, yeah, it could be a good pick there. For me, I'm probably going to do nothing. I'm probably going to join you, Will, on that. I'm going to captain Aubameyang, I think, because at the end of the day, what have I got to lose, frankly? I mean, I've got Salah, but might as well try it. Bournemouth at home is, as we said, fairly plumb. Now I've got Chilwell. I'm hoping he'll be fit. I've also got Rashford, but I've got Bednarek on the bench, who's home against Fulham. So I'm happy for him to come on, frankly. And I've got Westwood second bench away at Newcastle. I do have Wan-Bissaka sitting around at third bench, but that's where he would have been anyway against Man United at home. So I'm not too worried about that.
How long do you think he'll be out for?
I don't know. And that's going to be an interesting one that we'll have to cover over the course of the next couple of days. If he does look like he's going to be out for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, it's one of those awkward ones, isn't it? Because we bought him at 4.0. And that's a very nice kind of budget enabling device, basically owning a player who we know is going to be playing okay. And as we discussed, they've got okay fixtures during the doubles and around the doubles. When he gets back, you'd assume he's going to come back into the team. If it's one of those kind of short-term kind of pain fixtures and he's back on the weekend, then obviously it's absolutely fine. If it's kind of a long-term hamstring knack that's going to keep him out for 3 or 4 weeks, then you obviously reassess. And we've all made decent profit on him. It's just the case of whether we want to replace him really now and whether that's really what you want to spend a free transfer on. I don't know. If you're in Nick's sort of position and as he was before the injuries, then maybe I'd be thinking, yeah, maybe a Wan-Bissaka transfer does make sense if you've got nothing better to do and you've got 2 free transfers. But unless it's really impeding you, I'd just probably keep hold of him until we know more. But yeah, difficult one.
I guess it depends on your game week, double game week strategy as well. If you're going for the free hit in 31 like me and building for 32, then you might want to keep him. If you're doing the free hit in 32 and building for 31, then it makes sense to ditch, really, doesn't it? Because you obviously haven't got the game in 31. So, yeah, lots to consider.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So we're going to finish off the podcast bit here, and we'll take some questions from chat after that, as I mentioned. Just say who we are. We are Who Got the Assist, of course. You can find us on Twitter at WGTA_FPL, and our league code is 516-441.
Yep, and thanks, Will, for joining us. And we'll be back on next week after game week 29, and we hope this assists you.
Yep, goodbye. And yeah. Right. Okay, so from the chat then, we've just had a couple of questions already. I think the first, let's take the one that's just come up from James Taban. Sorry if I've mispronounced that, dude. Are Man City assets really essential, do we think, towards the end of the season, or at least this upcoming period? And we spoke about it a little bit, and I think that they really are, aren't they? Like, the next 3 fixtures just scream goals. They really do. Like, and Nick said earlier, Pep's going for the title. Like, it's not going to be the case that, like, all right, they are going to have a rotating cast of characters. That's just Pep roulette. You've got to accept that. You put that to one side and just kind of think, well, actually having a player like Sterling, if you can afford him, for me, the big issue that I can't afford him really if I want to do anything else with my team. But having him, having Kun Aguero, I find it very difficult to look around that. I think, Will, you're in a very good position there with Aguero in situ, because if Jesus isn't fit, then you're going to be seeing Aguero just playing and smashing up those games.
Yeah, I think that, both Aguero and Sterling look like brilliant options, to be honest. And if I could get both of them in my team, I would. Like, it's only because they've got, Salah, Pogba, Son. I suppose Son could be the one. Spurs fixtures do stiffen up a little bit. But he's looking still like a great option. I know blank for everyone as a captaincy, but he's still got the numbers. I know Kane's back, but I still think that he will do well. So yeah, it's tricky, but I think they are pretty essential, and I'd be looking to try and squeeze 2 in if you can. And I'm happy with Edison as well. I think they're going to keep it fairly tight at the back. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. I think Manchester City are, they're a top side, and they're definitely worth considering and covering in FPL. It is quite interesting to see that despite the blank 31, the masses are still transferring in Manchester City players en masse, and I think that speaks a volume in terms of what the masses think about the Manchester City assets, as in they are the key players and they're the key team to own and cover, despite the fact that they've got a blank in 31. I mean, for me, in terms of my overall strategy, I won't be transferring in Manchester City players right now, because I'm obviously building for 31 and they don't have a game, but I'm hanging on to those players that I have, Laporte and Sterling, for as long as possible, because I do, for a certain extent, fear not owning them. And, there's a bit of fear of missing out on Aguero points. There'll be fear. And I'd hope that Sterling would capitalise on that. And he's been a key player this season for Manchester City. And, yeah, definitely, I think, they're a great side. West Ham, Bournemouth, Watford, I want to have coverage for those games. So I won't be selling any Manchester City players at this moment in time and keeping them, even if I'm worried about the rotation. And if Laporte's injured for a long time, obviously I will sell him. But yeah, I mean, we've had another question about Arsenal, and Matt Dutchak asked us, should I keep Lacazette over Aubameyang? Do you want to start with this one, Tom, as the Arsenal fan?
I mean, what's really interesting is that Emery's comments after this, the game week just gone. He's come out and said that we'll be really relying on our squad. Will be the players who have played a lot of time during the last few games. During the last game, and they're probably not going to be able to play 2 games if we've got another game again next weekend. That's just come out on Arseblog. Which is the news site, not my porn habit. He says that we started on Thursday, then today, Wednesday, and after Saturday. So it's important to play with big performances, and we can change some players in the first 11. So you'd be thinking perhaps that players are going to be moved around, and you're thinking perhaps that Lacazette, because of the fact that he can't play against Rennes, or however you pronounce it. In the Europa League, would be a candidate to sit out the Bournemouth game, because I mean, we saw at the start of the season, for example, that Emery was doing a whole kind of, all right, there you go, Alexandre, you play this, Pierre, you play this, Alex, you play that, Pierre, you play that. And maybe it will be the case that he'll be happy to play Pierre this week and bench Lacazette for the Bournemouth game. And the next kind of few weeks, I think we're all probably going to jump off Arsenal, aren't we? In a little while. I think after this game week, we'll probably, Tottenham and Man United, be jumping off Emery's men. I think that'll be the time when Lacazette will be playing, and Aubameyang will probably be playing a bit part role ahead of that Europa League primacy they will have to assume. So would you remove Laka for Alba this week? Would I have removed Alba for Laka? In retrospect, I probably should have, but would I ever do it in an FPL sense with transfers not being in the vacuum? No. So I don't think I'd do it, but it's hard to empathize because it's quite a juicy transfer, and I'm really set up for it. I don't know. I really don't know, because it's one of those things where you could do it and it could absolutely smash it, or you could do it and for whatever reason Lacazette plays and Aubameyang's rested again, and you kind of think, oh, I was trying to be too clever. I just don't know. But no, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Would you ever do that sort of do that sort of move and kind of hope that the manager's telling the truth to the media?
I think if you are going to do it, that kind of move, then this is probably one of the weeks to do it. But yeah, I think at this stage of the season, just those transfers are too precious to be doing those type of moves. So yeah, I probably wouldn't. And you know, both Lacazette and Aubameyang can obviously score off the bench, and yeah, as they've shown previously. And yeah, it wouldn't be one that I'd consider if I was in that situation. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably too much of a sideways move. There's probably too much risk in terms of trying to follow up with that kind of move. It's not one that I'd personally recommend. But yeah, that's my opinion anyway on that matter. Had another question from Richard Nickfist. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. He said, "I can afford anyone. Who should I get?" Sterling ? Happy to. I don't know. What do you think about that one? You guys.
Well, out of does it mean Man City?
Anyone, I guess.
Like, anyone at all?
Yeah.
Wow. I guess it kind of depends on who's already got in his team. But yeah, I think Sterling's looking like one of the best options. Although I guess there's a chance he could be benched this game week. So yeah, you're always going to run a little bit of a risk with that. And yeah, it's tough to know out of anyone who to bring. I don't know. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, jag tror att du borde lita på dina instinkter, which kind of means you trust your instincts in Swedish. But I think that's probably where I go. I've probably completely hammered that, to be honest. I mean, my Chinese okay, my French is okay, my Swedish is absolutely terrible. Google Translate just makes me look like I can speak Spanish and Norwegian on Twitter. I'd probably say that the key with that kind of thing is to really see how your team sort of fits together, as Will was saying. I think trusting your close enough, thanks, Rich. But I think that trusting your instincts with that sort of thing is very useful. Like with Sterling, the fact is that you're probably going to be getting longevity out of him, like as Nick has said many times on this pod, which makes complete sense. Like he's going to be a player who is in the Kun bracket as being essential to that team, and as nailed as they're going to get. Is he going to play this week? Is going to be the one thing that you're going to have to weigh up. I don't know. I can easily see, a Bilva, Mahrez, Sterling and Sane sort of setup going on up front for Man City if Kun Aguero isn't quite fit enough or too tired to play the game. So if you do buy Sterling this week, you may see temporary disappointment followed by riches later on. I don't think I could ever properly do it, but I mean, is there any cause for saying, maybe think about buying Sane? Because he's probably going to play.
Stop talking about Sane.
We hate. I know we all hate him, but I mean, he's probably going to play. You know he can do.
I've come up with a better pick than that. So I've decided. I think my answer would actually be now Sadio Mane. Actually, really? I think Mane he's a really good pick. I'm probably going to be getting him in for my 31 team. But Liverpool's next 4: Watford, Everton, Burnley, Fulham are pretty decent fixtures, to be fair, considering if you are planning on building for a Game Week 31 team, why not just load up and get Mane in now, because you probably want him later on. And Mane's underlying stats are pretty damn decent as well. He's had 58 goal attempts, 48 which have been inside the box, which is second only for Salah for midfielders, and he's had 12 goals, which is second only to Salah for midfielders in terms of goals as well. So he's a real threat. I think he looks pretty good actually in the game today. And whilst Salah's perhaps been a little bit of descendancy in the last few game weeks, Mane really has been on the ascendancy. I mean, obviously he didn't score in the last game, but before that he had 4 goals in a row, scored in 4 games in a row. So he's a really good pick, I think, in the midfield. And if you've got infinite budget and you're worried about the City assets because of potential minutes lost because of the cup game and the 31 blank, then why not look at Mane?
Yeah. Are you thinking about what about the Liverpool double up in defence? You prefer Manny over the Liverpool defensive?
Well, I think I'm a bit worried about Trent Alexander-Arnold and his fitness. TAA would perhaps be the one that I would pick in the defence because of his price. I've already got Robertson, and then Van Dijk's quite expensive as well. I think I prefer right now is the expensive midfield. I think my plans are to bring in Mane for Son, and also for 31, I'm probably going to be selling Sterling and bringing in my best mate Hazard as well. See what he could do for that week before I wildcard.
Yeah, Hazard's an interesting one. I have been looking at him, but it's just so hard to fit him in.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, that's why TAA presents such a great option, really. I mean, you've got Edison, haven't you? So I guess Alisson could be an example there, and I think that I'm trying to find a way of fitting Alisson in on my wild card. Actually, I don't know, like with Robertson, for example, if you bought him very early doors at 6.0, i.e. in the beginning of the season, didn't sell him, then
I think that's what I've done actually. I never.
Yeah, don't get rid of him. You're basically fine. You're covered. You're done. For me, as somebody who doesn't own Robertson, then you've got a bit of an issue because am I going to pay 0.8 million more than you guys did? Probably not. Like because it just hamstrings the rest of my team. But as a player, like you want him. So it's quite tough, and you'd be hoping that TAA. And Klopp said that he was taking out the firing line, I believe, at the start of today. But you'd be hoping that once he's got more game time, once he's kind of progressed more towards match fitness, and he's probably going to be one that you'll be okay with throughout that kind of period because he's going to play a very decent role, isn't he? Because you can move. Like you might have a David Luiz or something, and he might be quite an easy way of moving somebody over. Yeah, it is tough, as Nick likes saying. Next question from Dan, FPL Chancellor, who has detected the fact that there's a bit of a split in the camp between a free hit in 31 and free hit in 32, although maybe Will has started wavering ever so slightly. Have you all decided on your chip strategies? Let's talk about this quickly, just because I'm sick of talking
there is no such thing as chip strategies and talk about quickly.
I know. There's no such thing as deciding either, I think, is probably worth talking about because it hasn't happened yet. And we haven't had to... Well, the moment you hit wildcard and the moment you hit free hit is the moment that you've actually properly decided, or maybe not. Maybe if you've decided to buy 2 game week 31 players this week at the opportunity cost of buying in I don't know, some player who's got decent fixtures in the short run, then maybe it's a bit different. But yeah, it's I don't know. Like, but I think I'm still on the free hit 31 train. Well, I've got 2 free transfers. No, 3 free transfers, haven't I? Up until game week 31. I've got 4 players who are going to be fit for that game week. So that means that to get 8, 9, I don't know, I could probably do it with 7, to be honest, if judging by the fact that Liverpool have got Fulham at home and buy the Liverpool players on game week 31 eve. Like I've got to really probably spend a -4 or -8 as well to do that. Do I want to do that? Do I really want to just ignore, for example, those 3 Man City fixtures over the course of the next few weeks? Do I really want to do that? Probably not. So I think I'm probably like, the fact is that we saw the fixtures come down, but like that hasn't changed well, it's straight in my face, isn't it? That hasn't changed the fact that my team setup is still the same. That hasn't changed the fact that I've still got 4 players who are fit for 31. I'd have to use all my transfers to get to 31 to be able to play the free hit in 32. So the way my team is at the moment, all the decisions I've made before, crap as they were, are dictating my future. So yeah, I think I'm still pretty wedded to 31. But Will, you were slightly wavering. Like, why is that?
To be honest, I think that, you know, I was wavering just because I think there's a fairly decent bunch of players which have got a game week 31 blank. So if you are planning your transfers, then there are good players to bring in who have got good fixtures around it. So it's not like you're wasting your transfer just for 1 game week. But at the same time, I think that the big one there is City. You know, I'm looking to bring City players in when, you know, other people are looking to lose them who are building for 31. So I think that I am probably going to free hit in 31 just because it gives you so much flexibility around, you know, the players you can bring in, and And yeah, you know, obviously you might struggle for 33, but you're either gonna, you know, it swings around. Right? It's a close call at the end of the day, and I think it just depends on how you're currently set up. And yeah, also things like the value got tied up. Like you don't want to be losing I don't want to be losing loads of money on the likes of Pogba, for example, if I need to get rid of him for 31. So yeah, I probably will be sticking with free hit 31. But as I said, I'm going to bank a transfer this week and have more information next week and have a look at my team. And you know, maybe some injuries crop up. Maybe we get some different news, or I don't know. It's always better to have a bit more time to think about these things. So yeah, it is a tricky one, but yeah, the key is just planning, really, making sure you plan early. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think I've decided in terms of my plans already. I'm pretty set in stone, really, which is, I guess, is a good thing. Obviously, there's going to be a few things that happen or can happen, which kind of throw plans to disarray. And I've had that to a certain extent this week. I originally planned on rolling, but now I'm looking at the -4. But I think that's fine. In terms of the general strategy, I'm still heading towards prepping that 31 team. I'm just taking hits on my route there, which is okay, I guess. But, you know, I'm not a big hits man, but I have to, if I've got an injury crisis and if I'm making enforced changes, I might as well stick to my original plan and bring in those 31 players just a little bit earlier than I planned originally, and that's fine. And then I'm going to be not free hitting that week. I'm going to free hit in 32 most likely, and then I have my team already set up for 33, which would be similar to the 31 team. And then I'm probably going to wildcard in 34 to use that bench boost in 35, and ideally have 15 players for the double game week, or maybe 14, 13 if we're excluding the likes of Salah. And then the triple captain's still a bit of a mystery in terms of how I use that chip, but it might be used in 36 against Huddersfield. I might even be tempted to use it in 31 for the Fulham game. I'm not too sure about that. I think 36 maybe is the better fixture still for Liverpool.
I don't think so. I mean, if you're basically saying I'm going to use it in 36 against a terrible team in Huddersfield, then you might as well use it in 31 against a terrible team in Fulham. Like, why not? I don't really see what you're waiting for in that case. Like, because
I think
they're both so bad.
I think in 36 it might be that less people own Mo Salah, so he might be more of a differential triple captain.
Makes sense.
That's what I'm thinking anyway, because I think in 31 everyone will be captaining in Salah anyway, so I'm only going to be adding an extra, 2 to 10 points or 2 to 20 points on everyone else's score. Whilst in 36, he might be less of a captain.
Fulham still might be fighting for game week 31. Like you'd expect Huddersfield to be dead in the water.
Definitely dead in the water in 36. Just playing for pride. Which I guess is still a big factor.
36 if I have to triple captain a single game week, and obviously that's a home match, isn't it, for Liverpool? Well, the Fulham one's away.
It'll be interesting to see as well. Hopefully Liverpool get knocked out the Champions League. Sorry, Lee, and anyone else that's listening that's a Liverpool fan. And then their sole focus is on trying to win the title in 36. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, maybe just have to see how it works. All right, thanks very much, guys. We're going to wrap it up there. Joined today by Will from Fantasy Football Hub. You can find them on Twitter at FFootball Hub, and Will himself is findable at FF Hub Will. Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Will. It's been really good fun, and we'll hopefully have you on again in game week 30 just to do a normal podcast.
Yeah, so it's been really good to be on, guys. Really enjoyed it, and yeah, looking forward to more podcasts. If any of you guys out there are into YouTube, I also have a YouTube channel. Just search Fantasy Football Hub on YouTube and it will come up.
Yeah, cheers, Will. Great to have you on, and thanks for all the questions, guys, as always.
Yep, cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.